Hey there. So today's gospel again comes from the 10th chapter of John, and it's talking about how, the gospel starts out with um, the religious leaders interrogating Jesus, saying, um, if you are the Christ, when are you going to tell us plainly? Why are you keeping us in suspense? And Jesus responds, well, I have told you, but you don't believe me because you are not among my sheep. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. So what caught my attention this time around? Always something different when I read the Gospels, but this time was, when the Jewish leaders said, how long will you keep us in suspense? If you are the Messiah, tell us plainly. Well, he had good reasons for not wanting to tell them plainly, right? If he could tell them plainly that he was the Messiah, the Christ, then they would be able to charge him with blasphemy. What I find very interesting here is that why did it take so long for the religious leaders to drum up a charge of blasphemy? I mean, it took them 3 years. They went after him for 3 years before they could, charge him with blasphemy. And it's because Jesus didn't go around proclaiming to be the Son of God. He didn't go around proclaiming to be the Christ. He let his actions speak for themselves. And he let people make up their own mind from the beginning of his ministry all the way to the end. When the disciples of John the Baptist came to him and said, are you the one that we're waiting for? Are you the Messiah, or should we look for somebody else? Jesus told them, well, go back and tell John what you see. Tell him that the blind regain their sight, that the dead are raised, that the poor have the good news preached to them, that, tell him these things and let him make up his own mind. Jesus never went around proclaiming to be the Son of God. It was the early disciples that recognized that about him. And when I apply that perspective, I guess, to today's world, the longer I live, the more I realize that, if somebody's the real deal, they don't have to say it. They don't have to tell you the real deal. And if they're saying they're the real deal, it's a pretty good indication that they're not. A smart person doesn't have to claim to be smart. A tough person doesn't have to claim to be tough. An honest person doesn't have to go around saying how honest they are. A good person isn't, touting their good deeds all over the place. People who are the real deal are pretty quiet about it. And it's the imposters that make a lot of noise. It's the deepest waters that are the most still. It's always the shallow water that makes a lot of noise. When you think of a creek, a shallow creek, you can hear it. The more shallow the water, the more noise it makes. The more shallow the person, the more noise it makes. A good thing to remember next time you turn on the TV, the news, and you have all these talking heads, shouting at one another, talking over one another. I'm I'm a particular fan of Noam Chomsky, and I find it very interesting that he doesn't even go on these programs, these TV programs, because he is the real deal. He doesn't want to engage these pseudo-intellectuals, these blowhards. He doesn't want to reduce the conversation to that level. So I think, one of the lessons from the scripture today is, as Jesus said, my sheep hear my voice. What is the voice of God? Well, it's hard to say exactly what is the voice, but it's easy to say what it's not. And if it's pretty loud, and if it's tooting its own horn, it's probably a pretty good indication that it's not.